You're listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
Check, check, 1, 2. Look like a little country, some rock and roll and blues, 'cause we sure love playing for good people like you. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.
Welcome to Music Local and Sustainable, the radio show that features discussions with and the music of local musicians. I am your host, Dave Lake. Tonight we have Richard Leo Johnson. He is one of the most innovative and inspiring acoustic guitarists on the American music scene, and he lives right here in Savannah. Welcome, Richard Leo Johnson.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You tend to pluck the strings in the usual place, but also in a variety of other places wherever there is strings. to get the different sounds that you want. Right.
Yeah. I always see these options available. And these harmonics, like, for example, and this is like a technique where you use your index finger or your thumb and you find a harmonic spot and do that. And so you can create harmonics in different places. And then I can use the whammy bar, for example, to get a little bit of an effect that way. Then you can also the hammer-ons. And using because I'm not using steel finger picks, for example, I can do I can use the downward strokes with my fingers. It doesn't limit you that way. So, see, it's already out of tune. But it's pretty intuitive for me. I learned to play with my fingers before I ever played with the pick, really. So the idea of using my fingers as an additional tool, it comes in very handy. And most people learn with a flat pick, and some people are like John McLaughlin, Tony Rice. I mean, people that play with a flat pick, they do things that are just mind-boggling with cross-picking and things like that. But I guess I was impatient. I'd like to make as much noise as possible as quickly as I could. So, and that's the way I'm treating the koto, is finger-picking it. As it's usually it's played with a plectrum.
Now, one more thing on electric guitars like this. There's always these knobs at the bottom.
Yeah, this is just a volume and tone knob right
here.
That's like a wah-wah pedal, basically. And I can do things like that, too. But it's an acoustic guitar that has... It doesn't really affect it. I can turn it down like... And it sounds more like a jazz guitar. Traditionally, people like Herb Ellis or the great jazz guitarists like that, Barney Kessel, their guitars typically had a very sort of a bassy quality instead of a real bright quality. Like most of the rock guitarists, like Jimi Hendrix and people like that, it was a real bright, hard, like really got down to it. Not that Jimmy was limited by anything, but those guys, the big jazz guitars, that tone was always a very sort of soft, muted sort of. Pat Metheny kind of came from that school, but then he started using a little bit brighter tone. But I kind of find it just a mid-range thing. So.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too, because using the pick versus using the finger style, you get that very different effect.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, I'll use a banjo as an example.
Yeah.
Using the classic bluegrass style versus the clawhammer style.
Exactly.
You get a very different tonal quality out of it.
That's a very good point.
I can't say I like one better than the other, because I like the bluegrass style from when they're really picking fast and really doing like 1,000 miles per hour.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the warmth of the clawhammer style, and just like this, the warmth of the finger style is just something that is so enveloping.
They're all tools. They're all different tools, and they were developed. I'm not a historian, but I would say those styles are developed to accompany certain sonic ranges. Whether it was the clawhammer style, a lot of it is very much about vocal accompaniment and things like that. Now, I don't know if you know who this is, but if you don't, you really should try to find any recordings by Doc Boggs. Do you know Doc Boggs?
No.
It's clawhammer style Appalachian, haunting, beautiful. The way he sang was like, oh man, it was scary. But he used the traditional clawhammer style. That kind of thing to me is like just him playing the banjo and singing these like soulful, these songs. Anyway, but then you go into things like traditional bluegrass, and then beyond that to Bela Fleck and things like that. And Bela Fleck still uses the steel finger picks for the most part, and plays in a traditional sort of the index finger, the middle finger, and the thumb is sort of a standard way that most people play the banjo, because it's a 4-string instrument, of course, with the 5th string added on top. You can just go back historically and find all kinds of amazing players that did that. I did that record that I gave you. It's called Duval Ray, Same Place, New Day, that I've made fairly recently, and it's a double album. That I used as the jumping off point was a 4-string banjo that I got off of eBay. It's an old tenor banjo, and I played that record with no finger picks, no thumb picks or anything, just strictly with the fingers. And it's supposed to be representative of a blind Creole street musician in New Orleans in the mid-'60s, whatever like that. And he had his rig that he would take down to the street corner every morning. His sister would take him down there and set him up, and he would just play all day. He had, your sort of standard one-man band set up with pulleys and chains and whistles and whatever like that. And that record is not recorded that way, but it sounds like that. But that's all made with a 4-string banjo. That's all just with your fingertips played like that.
And that's the character Duval Ray.
Duval Ray, yeah. And the other one is Roscoe Houndstooth, that thinks the electric guitar is a radio, and he thinks it summons up his ancient and dead ancestors through these things. You have to listen to it. One is very acoustic and it's just straight up. A friend of mine, he's a trombonist. His name is Alex Wasili, and he's doing really well for himself. He went to music school up in Illinois. And then Max Christman plays percussion on there. He's a local kid. So we just tried to make it sound like a kind of a, not down and dirty so much, but just raw and not necessarily slick. Because I wanted to sound like what a one-man band might be able to do. So it's got harmonica and stuff like that.
And which of the tunes on the Duval Ray CD was most reflective of that banjo and the effect?
Same Place, New Day is the name of the record, and that song, I really, really, really like the way that turned out. That is another one where the tempo changes occur, but it's It's got a range of moods to it. first song is Pop Your Fingers. Once again, I try to put first songs as sort of like a target, because I know from history with recording companies and stuff, they want you to put a song at the very beginning that's not too long, not too complicated, but sort of like gets people's attention. And the other record, which is, like I said, is pretty crazy. And some of the songs on the Roscoe Houndstooth, it's called Listen to the Sky. And I made it all with a really, really old vintage Silvertone electric guitar. And I used a multi-band radio, and that's pretty much how he's dialing in his spirit relatives with that, like that. So it's really funny. The very last song is called Wakan Tonka. I'll research Native American names of things. Wakan Tonka basically just means creation. That's one you might get a kick out of.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
If you enjoy our programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. As an individual, you can give any amount, become a basic station member, or become a serious fan of the station. To check out membership rates and to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select to donate monthly or subscribe to an annual membership. Again, to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select to donate monthly or subscribe to an annual membership. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP.
The Savannah Bicycle Campaign has published a free cycling guide and map. The Bike SAV map contains downtown and county-wide maps, tips for safe cycling, and overview of state and local laws relevant to bicycling. The guides are available at local bike stores and other businesses, at City Hall, and online at bicyclecampaign.org/routes. Print copies available by emailing info@bicyclecampaign.org. You're listening to Music Local and Sustainable, and I'm your host, Dave Lake. Tonight we have Richard Leo Johnson. And so the Roscoe Houndstooth character thinks that the guitar is a radio that he can communicate with his dead relatives. And get inspiration from them.
The story's written into the tray card if you read it, because it's another thing that has to do with Vernon McAllister. He's hitchhiking across the country, and the last thing that he owns before he leaves the hotel where Roscoe works as the groundskeeper is an electric guitar. He says to Roscoe while Roscoe's out sweeping in the parking lot, he said, "I want to give you something, man." And Roscoe says, "Okay." He's never seen an electric guitar. He's lived in this little hut his entire life on the reservation. Then finally, subsidies ran out, so he had to go look for work in town, which is a 30-minute bus ride to the highway. Anyway, so he goes into the room, the hotel room, and flips open the case, and Roscoe goes, "What is it?" He doesn't know what it is. Vernon walks over and just plugs the guitar in to the wall and turns it on. And this is an old Silvertone that had the amp built into the case, which I actually have. And as soon as he turned it on, it started going like, making all these noises and feeding back and all this stuff. And they just walked away and left Roscoe in the room. And then Roscoe's just, all he does is like look at it and starts turning the knobs and stuff like that. And that's sort of the catalyst for him to experiment with this new gift that he was given. I know that sounds pretty nuts, but I can't help myself.
What would be a song from Who Knew Charlie Shoe album that would be reflective?
I think that probably there's two songs. And one's called Rock-a-Silly. It's supposed to be his take on rockabilly. That's a popular song. some kid on YouTube. Somebody said, look, you got to see this guy trying to play one of your songs on YouTube. And I said, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. So I looked it up, and he's playing that song, which is a very sort of complicated finger picking song. He's playing it with a flat pick on this old like Yamaha guitar. And he's actually kind of got it. I was like, oh my God, he's playing that song. So anyway, obviously somebody liked the song. And then the other song that I think is absolutely really beautiful that Greg played a glockenspiel on, it's called Forgotten Lullaby. And that's another song I think you might really enjoy. It's a sweet little piece of music.
Well, I do have to bring up, again, Vernon McAllister. Mm-hmm. Many of the albums, I'll use Celeste as an example, you sort of get into the sense of the feeling, and it immerses you for a while.
Yeah.
And however, Vernon McAllister is little vignettes.
Yeah. There's little short songs that are blend into one another. Yeah. Yeah. There's no real long pieces of music on that. There's one that's a little bit longer, but it was the first record I ever made, first recording I ever made, and first series of songs I ever made that I didn't necessarily think had to be memorized for public performance. I wanted them to be sequenced in a way where they related to one another during the course of the recording, but I didn't feel like each piece had to be a certain length. I mean, some of the songs are only like 30 seconds long, but they're segues to a certain extent, punctuation marks or whatever. So, I don't know. I just really like putting that together in my attic at home.
And I'll warn listeners, if they go out and get the album, that it's also the one that you will continue to listen to in the parking lot Again,
Oh.
another reason why I don't listen to your music in my car.
You don't
because
want to
I'll
wind
do
up
this-
in Cuba, right?
One, I don't want to wind up in Cuba, and two is I wind up continuing to listen to it sitting in the parking lot and missing the appointment that I'm going to. But again, in the same sense, albums to me are almost like relationships.
Oh, totally.
Because right off the bat, if someone gives you a very weak handshake, you start to wonder. But I'll tell you, Morning Glory is a hug. That's an
so
embrace.
sweet of you to say that, because that's the one song that's a little longer. It's a little longer, and it's one of those pieces that I feel that particular song really represents the entirety of the record itself. And I really appreciate you saying that, because that song is, to me, like, I listen to that and go like, who wrote that song? Honestly, I'm sitting like, where did that come from? I take credit for it because somebody had to play it, but it's almost like I feel like I was a session musician following directions from some other source. I know that sounds kind of cuckoo, but that's the way songs like that just come to. It's like, I'm just so honored to be a part of something like that I don't even know where it came from. It's like, it's very mysterious. It's a mysterious process, but that's so sweet of you to say that.
It's sort of like channeling.
Yeah,
channeling the universe.
Whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's a sum total of influences and all that kind of.
And when you play and start inventing, reinventing, repurposing all of these techniques, you experiment with a variety of different techniques, things you probably have seen other people do, and you modify them, things that you've never seen anybody do. Mm-hmm. Is it just the sound you're after, or do you try out a lot of things and say, I don't like that, I don't like that, I do like that?
Well, I'll tell you that one of my analogies is like using the different tunings. And I'll just make up, I mean, I have no idea. I don't even know what these notes are. I have no earthly idea. Same thing with the koto when I started redoing that. I just tune the strings to it sounds a certain way that seems, it kind of gives me a little bit of a, ooh, where'd that come from? It's like the inspirational moment thing. And this sounds completely nuts, but when something sounds like, it kind of gets me. It's like, all of a sudden, like the blood rushes from my face. I know that sounds nuts, but it's like, and that to me is over the years I felt like that's a signal that I've done something right, based on my desires or my whatever, my intuition. So that's a big part of it. It's like I'm just following a trail of breadcrumbs through the forest. If I lose track, I'll kind of just take a nap and then get up and go on to the next thing. I'll start off with like a tuning or something like that, and I'll find a chord form that sounds like, and then I added this extra device, for example, to give it some additional color, like the whammy bar or something like that. And so I used to joke around about the idea of invention, is that, let's just say you create a tuning and you don't know what it is, or you have inspiration. My joke is, it's like you get kidnapped and blindfolded and thrown in the back of a car and driven out onto some like remote highway in Montana, and you're thrown out of the car and you take the blindfold off, and then you have to figure out how to get back home. And that's the way I sort of treat writing songs. It's like starting from one place is completely, in many ways, just like not familiar or not readily recognizable, and then just kind of go from there and kind of whittle your way back into that place, that comfort zone or whatever it is. So this, I don't know, you're very sweet to say that stuff, and I've worked really hard over the years to do that, and sometimes it's not so beneficial in terms of a career.
You brought a koto.
Oh, I brought a koto, yeah. You want to hear that?
Yeah. How did you get interested in the koto?
I started several years ago. I made a recording on the guitar on my first record that I made with Blue Note, and the song. It's a Japanese name that my manager at the time, his girlfriend was Japanese, and she helped me kind of come up with a translation for it. So I basically would play in concert, and I would do this song, and then I would like take a pencil and stick it up underneath the strings of the guitar and then slide it up to a certain point. Then you could play it like a koto, which has all these frets. So that's the traditional way of playing a koto. But it's usually played with a plectrum, but I'm using my fingers. So basically that's the way a koto would be. Like, that's the way it would be played. So I would play the guitar like that, and two pencils and a beat on it with the pencils, and people just really thought that was interesting. They liked that. But I'd never actually thought about buying a koto. This is a baby. This is just like a real basic one. If you look at it online, you can get kotos that are like 6 feet long. They're absolutely stunning. Beautiful pieces of art. And the artists that played the koto, a lot of them were women, which is very interesting to me too. So about a year and a half ago, I was looking on eBay. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just try to buy one of these things. And so I looked on eBay and I found one from China. And I'm really not so clear on the history of it, but I think it's traditionally Japanese, but I know it's Asian. These are like student models. So I got this thing for a very reasonable price, like $300. And they sent it to me from China. And when I got it, it was like, okay, this is a big mess. It's like there's this many strings, just count them. That's a lot of strings. And you have these frets that are all movable. So it's like, oh, dear Lord. So I just like, okay, what am I going to do? So I started fooling with it, and it just instantly just makes a like a beautiful sound. But what I'm doing with my fingers, because it's a habit for me, is like I'm using it like a harp almost. So I thought, well, I'm going to just give this some time. So I stashed it away for a little bit. And I came back to it just about a month ago. Because I'm thinking about doing some shows with this guy, Greg Bendy. And I thought, wow, that'd be a fun thing for Greg if I could work this out, right? This is the bare bones beginning of me just trying to work with the koto. It's not traditional by any means. I'm going to get scolded by some historian, I'm sure. But I'll just play a little piece that I'm working on at the beginning, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I've just started with it, but anyway, it's kind of fun.
Well,
I like it, like, it takes it into almost a cartoonish thing.
Well, I'm waiting for the story.
Oh, there is a story.
It's probably evolving just like the music is
It
evolving.
is. What happened was, somehow there's a smear that got on the interior of my car, on the door panel. It's like sort of a chromey thing. And I was looking at it real closely, and I thought, it looks just like a geisha girl. It does. It's just like this smear. I left it there, and I took photographs of it. It looks just like an impression of an Asian woman with the hair. Well, there's my jumping off point. A smear of dirt on the door panel of my car is the album cover. There's a spirit character, and there is a name for it. I looked up mythical Japanese monsters, and one of them is this guy who plays a stringed instrument that walks along the bottom of the ocean in perpetuity, and he's blind. And there's drawings of it are like, oh my God, this is so scary. There's this old, like, skeletoid-looking character that walks around the bottom of the ocean playing this instrument in perpetuity.
Well, tonight we've had Richard Leo Johnson in the studio, and this has been marvelous, absolutely marvelous, a revelation.
Well, you're so sweet. I really do appreciate everything that you said and our conversation greatly. It's an honor to be, here with your show. It really is. I'm glad we're in the same hometown.
This has been another edition of Music Local and Sustainable, and I've been your host, Dave Lake. Save this time for another show next week.
Well, I know we ain't headed for the Hall of Fame. Gonna give it what we got, man, that ain't no shame. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.